All right, everyone. Thank you so much for another episode of 28 Days of Blackness. We have with us today Dennis Febo, and today he'll be talking about Don Pedro. So tell us a little bit about Don Pedro.
Peace, peace. So Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who is also known as the father of the Puerto Rican nation, aka the teacher because of his oratory skill, was the founder of the Nationalist Party, or the Independence Liberation Party for the island of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is till today the longest standing colony in the world, first under Spanish rule and then under the United States rule, beginning in 1898, making us participate in every single major war, us being contributors to the winning of the major battles in these wars, which Obama just commended before leaving office for the 65th Infantry. Don Pedro fought for the freedom of the island, economic freedom, knowledge of our people, a lot of different things that he was able to do with the Nationalist Party and all the people that joined them. But with independence and freedom comes oppression, and that's basically where down the path he headed down.
That is awesome, man. A lot of people don't understand anything about that rich history. You know, we talk about, independence and, saying that it's one of the longest colonies ever, right? So what is he famous for specifically? Is there any, moment in time period that you can actually speak to?
He founded the Nationalist Party in the 1930s,
okay.
and it wasn't until the 50s that they actually started taking, some of the nationalists started taking armed action against the oppression that was going on the island. The United States government, when they noticed the rising of Puerto Rican nationalism, they passed this law called Ley de la Mordaza, which meant that you were not allowed to speak about Puerto Rican nationality. The flag that we wear today, that we use to represent our island, was illegal to even wave. Thus, if you fast forward till today, anytime you see a Puerto Rican institution, you will always see the American flag flying next to it, because it's still till today, 2019, illegal to fly our own flag by itself. Dr. Campos was a graduate from Harvard Law. When he graduated from Harvard Law, he decided to join the military, the Marines, and when he did, they put him with the African American unit because he was dark-skinned. When he got in that unit is when he realized the way racism was impacting black Americans in the United States, and then made the connection on why it is that they treat Puerto Ricans the way that they do. And there's a couple of newspaper clippings from back then that show basically the United States being the elder, the one that takes care of everyone, and then you had Cuba, black people, Puerto Rican, and Dominicans like little black babies in a specific caricature, just to show that they used the fact that we were juvenile at mind, that we didn't know how to govern ourselves as a means to invade and take us over. So Dr. Pedro fought against that, the fact that he had a law degree, the first black to ever graduate from a Harvard Law School. He assisted in writing the Irish Constitution, which still exists till today. And because the Irish and Puerto Ricans were fighting for independence is how they found a common ground. On top of that, Irish were seen as lesser white people back in the day than it is today. And the Nationalist Party did a lot to raise the awareness of the Puerto Rican people and the need for us to have independence and self-sustainability.
Wow, man. That's crazy. When you hear about it and you hear all his accomplishments and everything that he actually did, and to fight against oppression, which is commendable in and of itself, but there has to be some kind of backlash, right? There has to be some kind of sacrifice. And is there anything that, was there any repercussions to this fight?
Man. He spent the majority of his life behind bars. Every speech he gave, he was locked up. When he was released, he would give another speech, he'd get locked up again, just for speaking his mind. Up until the point where Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, from United States physician, was down there doing experiments on cancer, and they started radiating and transplanting cancer cells into Puerto Rican nationalists just to see the effect and how it would treat them. There's a couple of pictures out there that show Dr. Pedro's flesh falling. Basically they say if he touched his flesh, it would just fall off of his bones. That's how much radiation they torture him with. And lo and behold, over the course of his life, over and over being in prison, it took a toll on him until he passed away in 1965. But his image, what he did, his oratory skill, the power that he spoke with, anybody that's kind of woke and understands Puerto Rican history understand the power of Don Pedro. And the relationship that he created for many of us in our minds between the quote-unquote black struggle here in the United States and the black struggle in Puerto Rico, which is the same struggle.
A lot of people don't actually, acknowledge that. They always look at it as like a separate struggle or stuff like that. And I always say oppressed people have more in common than they don't,
Well, if you take this fun statistic, the 4 colonized populations in the United States, which are African American, Mexican American, Native American, and Puerto Rican, are also the 4 poorest ethnicities in the United States, which goes to speak on the direct relationship between colonization of the mind and how a community feels about itself, how a community is able to sustain itself. And again, because most of the premise on what we've been ruled upon is that we're juvenile, that we don't have the capacity to do this on our own. Someone like Don Pedro and a lot of other leaders in our community made it a way for us to understand that that's something that we need to own if we want to actually have self-advocacy, self-sustainability in our own communities.
Wow, man, that's very deep and very true. When you start to think about these things in their more literal sense, you start to understand that there's always a correlation between those populations, right? And we're talking about the story, and we talk about the torture, which is I know that you can go on because you gave us the short version of it and got a chance to actually myself look into it a little bit more in detail. But you talked about radiation and radiated cells, and we talk about also, don't we have military bases? And in Puerto Rico, wasn't there testing of...
Puerto Rico has the highest amount of military base per square mile in the entire planet Earth. Right? And all of that land is still owned by the United States up until today. Puerto Rico is what they call the gateway to the Americas, because the currents of the ocean would bring the ships straight into Puerto Rico or the nearby islands, Barbuda, Bahamas. This is how the story began, going through that main gate, through that main door. And it is a military strategic geographic point in the Western Hemisphere, which is why the United States won't let it go ever. As much as we've tried to fight, they have killed every single one of our leaders up until today. And the last one, Filiberto Ojeda Rios, was killed in his home next to his wife, sniped by a mule that's in position now. He ordered that hit, killed one of our leaders on the day we celebrate our cry for independence, which is the 23rd of September. Which goes to show me that these people know our history better than we do and use it against us.
Wow. I mean, that's very deep when you start breaking things down. So taking, from Don Pedro's, taking from his legacy, how does that motivate you? How does that motivate you to become a better person, who advocates for, liberation or advocates for education and things like that? What do you do in our community based off of the lessons that you've learned from?
I mean, I can remember I grew up in PR and I grew up here in the United States in Brooklyn, and I never heard of leaders of our community that did such great things. I hadn't heard it, and I remember always being proud about being Puerto Rican until I was confronted with what it was, and I couldn't define it, I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't really pinpoint anyone that could be an example or role model for me to know what it's like to be the best Puerto Rican possible, right, at this point. So learning his story sparked me, because it goes to show that you could be brave in the face of adversity. Something like, a tiny little island of Puerto Rico, which is 100 miles by 30 miles, would stand up against the empire of the United States of America and still be able to influence the entire population. Now, it's easier said than done to be able to change minds, but for those minds that were sparked, all the way up until today, a lot of people that are still involved in the independence movement still hold a lot of pride in the concept of the Nationalist Party and Don Pedro Albizu Campos.
That is amazing, and thank you so much. We appreciate that. This has been, Dennis Febo, and the information that he's provided us is, as he said, you really don't hear about this information because, pretty much if you're not represented in any of the history books, then, you're going to feel as if you're invisible. And, maybe it's done on purpose, or maybe it's not. But we thank you for sharing that story. So leave us with something, a quote, a saying, something. Give us some positive energy before you go.
I like if you don't understand the power, in order to be empowered, one must understand the right and the power behind self-declaration. And here is that at some points in my life, I declare myself, as an example, just out of the many things that I can declare myself as, Puerto Rican, but not understanding what it meant and letting other people define it for me, especially with negative connotations and definitions, did not allow me to feel my true power and my true humanity, right, on this earth, because I can't realize the greatness of who me, my people, and my ancestors are. So now that I understand and I declare, and every time I affirm it, it reverberates through my body. The pride, all the positive associations, and all the beauty that I learned about the struggle of our ancestors. On top of all the crap that we've been through, we're still standing. On top of all the crap that we've been through for centuries, we're still here representing. We're still here holding our heads high. Many of us are here breaking generational chains, letting the world really truly see, truly express, say, Puerto Rican or Black, or however it is that we choose to identify ourselves. So my message would be just get to know who you are, get to know the power of your ancestry, get to know the power of your spirituality, and there's nothing that can stop us as a community.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Join us again tomorrow, 28 Days of Blackness, and we'll be back.